And it's such a great compliment when people want a sequel to that book. I think that shows that they really feel a connection, that Melinda's alive in their heart, and they want to see how she's doing. I actually had her show up in Catalyst. Catalyst is set in the same high school as Speak. And she's a cameo walk-on role for like a page and a half, so you can see she's doing okay. She's doing lots of art projects. But, you know, in terms of the craft of writing, Speak, I think, I'd like to say, is a pretty darn good, perfect arc. You know, that arc of character and facing all this. And so what am I going to do to her next? I don't know. I do think, though, you know, my publishers would like nothing better. But I think it's really sleazy to write a sequel just because your publisher wants to make some money. I'm not doing it for that reason. If I do it, though, I think I would write it as an adult novel, because the only thing to do would be to treat her as a 30-year-old or a 35-year-old. And it might be interesting, because if Melinda's like 14, 15 in Speak, that's been 15 years since that book came out. Which means that she's older than everybody in the publicity department at my publishers, which is really weird to think about. But there's also been some interesting shifts and not shifts in the way we look at assault in America and feminism, and so she might be an interesting character to run some of my thoughts about that through, so stay tuned.
Okay, now I want to talk to you about the trend in dystopian.
Oh, yeah.
And I also, you know, to that point about how there have been shifts in terms of feminism, to me it seems like the new strain of feminism is about physical strength for women. But I wanted to hear, you know, I was trying to gather strain to see if there might be a story to be written about fourth wave feminism and what that's shaping up to look like. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, like, new feminism? How is feminism evolving now, and how is it reflected in YA?
Oh, it's fascinating, because there's been a lot of conversations on the internet the last couple of weeks, because all of a sudden there are some male writers who are very talented, wonderful writers, but they're male, straight, middle-class writers who are writing these kinds of books. And traditional media went, oh my gosh, there's this thing called YA, and the kids, they love it. And then all us women who've been writing this stuff for years are like, excuse me? And so this younger generation of feminists are outraged. It's been amazing to watch the well-placed fury. And so that has made me think a lot about the difference between generational feminism. And I think part of it has to do with, and first of all, just the conversations that we're having are amazing, are wonderful. And I've blogged about this, if you want to go to my Tumblr and see my opinions about this. But I think, like, from my generation of feminists, first of all, I grew up with a grandmother who could remember the first time her mother voted. My grandmother was 10 when my great-grandmother came home and voted, and my great-grandfather asked my great-grandmother who she voted for, and my great-grandmother said, I'm not going to tell you. That changed everything in that household. And when I was a kid, I can remember Syracuse Herald Journal, the paper that we had. I was 3rd or 4th grade. Their want ads listed jobs for women and jobs for men. And I said to my mom, I said, the men have all the interesting jobs. And she said, that's just the way it is, honey. And then my mom had to face all kinds of sexism in her workplace. And so I come from, you know, I'm so excited that there's so many opportunities for women, although it sure would be nice to be paid the same, right? But I see how far we've come as a country. And I want to keep us moving forward, because feminism, I think, just means it's good for everybody. It's equality for all. But if you are 22 and you've grown up with all these opportunities, I think that the injustices stand out in starker relief than they do for somebody my age, which is perfect. That's why young people tend to lead cultural change. Because I'm going like, well, this is not what we want, but it's pretty darn good. And people half my age are like, are you nuts? No, this is outrageous. This is not good enough. And so they're carrying that energy forward. It's really exciting to watch.
I have an 11-year-old boy, and I have a mother friend who has an 11-year-old girl, and she's fearing for the male choices that her daughter will have, because we're raising women to be very, very competent, but it seems like the boys are becoming less competent. That's what it feels like, or tuned out more than the girls. The girls are on it, and the boys are tuned out with video games. I mean, that's what it feels like.
Are these both your only children, or your oldest children, these 11
Well, I only have one, she only has one, and
Okay.
I'm just basing this on what I'm observing as
okay.
a mother in the parental landscape.
Okay. So take a deep breath. It's always worth
your opinion.
Yeah, my opinion is you shouldn't worry about this for 20 more years.
Okay.
That people, regardless of gender, whatever, mature at different stages. I have a lot of kids who are in their 20s right now, and they see some of their male friends need to take a little bit longer time to play video games and whatever. So what? If they're paying their own bills and they're not making babies, what do we care? They'll be okay.
All right. So to go back to the YA world that I was talking about, having covered so much dystopian fiction, and the heroines in this fiction, that's what I think is interesting, because they seem like they're a different breed, and they have a lot of similarities between them. Divergent, Hunger Games, all the biggies. Do you read these books? Are you, okay, you don't read them?
I don't read any YA.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I read let me admit that I read very little YA. Because I don't want, all my friends are writers, most of them are YA writers. I will occasionally, if you see a blurb on a book that I blurb, I absolutely read it, because I won't blurb anything without reading it. And I read a lot of things that I'm asked to blurb that I turn down, because I'm that snarky. If it's not, I won't say it is. But it's because I don't want other people's voices in my head. And so I will read YA when I'm working on a historical novel, which I'll be doing for the rest of this year, so I'll get caught up. I've got stacks around my house, and so I will be catching up and doing some reading, but I don't want other people's voices in my head.
Okay, then I won't put them in there.
Okay.
We have 15 minutes to go, and I would like to open the floor to people who'd like to ask questions of Laurie, and I don't know how this works, if they have to come along.
No, I think they can shout.
Go ahead and yell.
Yeah, don't waste your time going to a mic.
Back in the back.
Right there.
You just mentioned that you have a stack of YA books at home. What are some of them?
Oh, man. I haven't read Fault in Our Stars yet.
Oh, that's a good one.
No, and he's a friend. I know. It's like, waiting. There's, I'm just trying to think of some of the ones that I've accumulated recently. Veronica Roth. Do you think I should read them? Yes. Really?
It depends.
Is the first one better? The first one? All right, I'll read the first one and then we'll talk. I haven't read 13 Reasons Why yet.
Oh, read it.
I know. You don't tell him that. I think I faked it in conversation with him once. What are you going to do? It's just like, whatever. And then Kekla Magoon, do you know who she is? No. Kekla Magoon's got a new book coming out, and I actually have read her other stuff, and I loved hers. Jacqueline Woodson has a memoir coming out that's in poetry. That'll be out in August. It's called Brown Girl something. It's Brown Girl what? Brown Girl Dreaming. It has the most beautiful cover I've ever seen. And so I'm actually going to get an ARC of that. Because Jackie's a friend and she's an important writer. So I think those are going to be the top 5. If you have suggestions, let's send them to me, because I actually am going to be doing a binge read.
Over here. Front row. Librarian, I hear. No. Okay.
One question, one request. The question, like you said, you're working on research for the rest of the year, so Ashes? Okay.
Ashes is the third book in my trilogy about the American Revolution, told from the perspective of Northern slaves. And my life got kind of overturned a few years ago because I got really, really sick. And then I had to write this book first. I was contractually obligated. So from May 1st until December 31st, I still have some trips, but mostly I will be holed up in my cottage writing. So, I'm hoping, you never know because things happen, and if the writing doesn't go well, I know what's going to happen. I know the characters. If I can get that turned in good shape by the end of the year, there's a chance it would be out next fall. but don't quote me on that.
Well, for anybody here who might be a student or a teacher or a would-be writer, if you could quickly tell the Ariel story.
Oh.
There's so many teachers will look at, remember YA and say it's not as sophisticated and there's not, you can't look and dig into it the way you can things that were written.
Right. Yeah, because YA literature, it turns out, actually is literature. And it's frankly some of the best literature being written in America today. And the story that I use when I'm talking about symbolism with kids, because when I was in high school, I didn't believe symbolism existed at all. And I really got in a lot of trouble because I confronted my teacher about that one day. But when I talk to students, and I talk to students in school, I tell them that think about symbolism as a hidden code. It's a secret code. It's like an Easter egg in a video game, right? And if you're a really clever author, you plant these things throughout the book. And the theory is that on a conscious level, you read the book to see what happens next. But in a work of literature where the authors tried to go a little bit deeper, the author employs image systems and symbols that resonate with us in a deep level, which I personally don't think many readers pick up on the first time through. But I think at the end of a book, if the author has succeeded on the text level and the subtext level, it leads to much greater satisfaction at the end of the story. And it tends to lead to a story that just stays with you. And one of the favorite examples I do of this in Speak is, there's a great Thanksgiving Day scene, which, by the way, was my mother's favorite scene in the whole book, which is so funny for so many reasons. I'm an author because I can't afford therapy, by the way. So it's kind of a meltdown at the family Thanksgiving, and long story short, Dad makes this terrible turkey stew that is so awful that he has to bury it in the backyard for fear of the plumbing. My father actually did this in the 70s. It was a thing. And Melinda, the main character, just kind of tells us that Dad has buried this stew next to the grave of her dead dog, and the dog's name is Ariel, right? That's all's mentioned. If I was writing in the 1750s and the 1860s, I would use the Bible as a source of a lot of context for my readers because that was a language they all understood. I can't count on that in modern America, but I do know that my readers know Sesame Street and Walt Disney. Ariel, anybody? From what movie?
Little Mermaid.
The story of a girl who gives up her voice for a boy.
Wow.
Oh, right. So there's that stuff planted throughout the entire.
Wow.
Now that doesn't come up for me in the first draft, but what comes out of a first draft are situations where I know if I'm a little bit more careful with my choice of details and just kind of throw these things in there over and over again. I referenced Maya Angelou several times in Speak, specifically because I know her groundbreaking, all-important book, I Know Why a Caged Bird Sings, is frequently banned in the U.S., and that was me being completely subversive and wanting my readers to go and look up that book because it's a great book, but it's also the story of a young girl who's assaulted and who doesn't speak up after it for a long time. So, did I answer your question?
I want a kid. Okay. All right, kid. Oh, yeah. Well, the inspiration is very obvious. Benjamin Franklin is my favorite American hero as a kid, and then as an adult I found out that he owned slaves for pretty much his entire adult life. We prefer to think about 80-year-old Ben Franklin, who became the first president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, because by that time he got his head out of his butt. But that's because conveniently, he had freed his slaves in his will, but they all died before he did. And I realized that if I didn't understand that Ben Franklin had been a slave owner and had profited from slavery his entire adult life, that I knew nothing about my country's history. So that set me, and that research came up in the course of Fever 1793, and that set me on the path, for more than 20 years now, re-examining the American Revolution. Because when people were saying, throw off the chains of oppression, they were talking about throwing them off for a white person. And I'm like the whitest woman in America. Look, I glow in the dark. And so I really feel
I just read and read and read, and my editor for Fever and for Chains is a friend now, Kevin Lewis, African American, and we had years of conversations about race until I came to the conviction that slavery is not an African American experience. Slavery is the American experience. It is our original sin. And our country continues to be enslaved, our nation, our potential as a nation, because of the horrors of racism. And racism is an absolute after effect of the fact that we, white people, we don't study slavery. We don't want, it is so overwhelming when you start to think about it, that it's, and this is why I think a lot of white people, look how quiet this audience just got, which is largely white audience, just like, oh, do we have to talk about that? That makes me really uncomfortable. Yes, we do. And so that's when I started to realize, I mean, honestly, if anyone is talking about my books in 100 years, I fervently pray that they'll be talking about Chains and Forge and Ashes, because I want those books to be a part of our nation's coming to grips with our history, so that maybe my grandchildren will live in the America that I've always dreamed of, that I think we've all dreamed of. So that was the inspiration.
We have 5 minutes left, and I'm going to try to take
lightning round, short answers.
Lightning round, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go Yellow Jacket.
Why did Roy have to die?
Why did Roy have to die? To trigger Dad again. Right.
Front row. I'm sorry.
Who do you know in Hollywood? And see me later.
All right, there was blue sweater.
Hang on, I got to back up. And she gets extra time. No, seriously, come on. I'm feeling so neglected. I'm feeling so not loved. Because all my friends have movies. I got this little dinky Lifetime movie, but come on. I want an opening. Seriously.
Do not.
Thank you. All right. Tell everybody you know. We're in LA. Make this happen.
Okay, blue sweater.
Okay, two questions. What's your Tumblr name, and what book influenced you?
Tumblr, Halt Sanderson. What book influenced me the most? Actually, The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, by Christopher Paul Curtis, which is a genius book. What that man taught me in that book is how you use humor to engage readers with your characters, and that once you have your readers and your characters kind of sitting in the palms of your hand, you can do anything.
Yes.
There seems like such a sweet guy, so I was wondering where did you get this inspiration for him, and also for the anti-hate.
Oh, the Anti-Date Under the Stars, wasn't that lovely, right? I get goosebumps just thinking about it. This is actually a deeply romantic book, except for the parts that are not. Actually, there's a lot of my husband in Finn's character. There really is. He wasn't a swimmer, but except for that. So yeah, and he really does goofy things like that. So raise your standards. They're out there.
Okay, red shirt.
I was just wondering, for the writers in here, are you like a discovery writer who kind of writes and figures it out as you go, or are you a planner, plotter?
Yes. Traditionally, my historical novels are very carefully plotted and outlined, because I have to start with the history of a time and place. That's the exterior events. Figure out how the character interacts with them, and then figure out the character's internal journey. My YAs, much to my editor's horror, take a long time, because I just start with a character dealing with something, and basically the first draft is 200 pages of stream of consciousness mess. And then I have to go put in a plot.
Gray shirt.
Why Vet Volunteers?
Because when I had sold Speak, there are Vet Volunteers, it's Babysitter's Club meets Animal ER, written for 9-year-olds. And I sold Speak, but it hadn't been published yet. And I had, my oldest kid was like in 6th grade. And I had a publisher contact me and say the magic words, 5-book contract. And I said, because nobody thought Speak was going to do well. My publisher had no hopes for it at all. And I had been a journalist and a freelance journalist, so I just figured I can do 5 books. It was originally published by American Girls, and now it's published by Penguin. The Vet Volunteers are still wildly popular, incredibly popular in France for reasons I don't understand. But they're lovely little books, and it's a great introduction to a reader for me.
Okay, 2 last questions. Boy, in blue.
I live in the boondocks, so there's very little theater, sad to say. And I don't watch a ton of television or movies. Not because I don't like them, but just I don't really have time. I fall asleep early at night. And I think there are some, like, and I'm a very lowbrow culture person. Like, my favorite movie probably is Van Helsing. Yeah, I really, and when I was a kid, all I read was science fiction and fantasy. So one of these days I have to write it. But you know, what's interesting is that it doesn't matter kind of the exterior world of it. What's really interesting is human heart. And I think, you know, I'm getting kind of older, right? So I've seen a lot of hearts in action, and I will never run out of inspiration.
Last question, and somebody's gonna have to yell for it. First person to yell gets.
Right there, you got it.
So what advice do you have for currently teen often feel pressure during colleges and getting titles? So what advice do you have not to get caught up with college obsessive environment?
Have your parents call me. No, seriously, I'm writing a book for parents one of these days because, I mean, I understand as a parent you want your kids to be okay. One of the statistics I looked up when Catalyst came out was that when I graduated high school in 1979, 33% of high school graduates went to college. When my oldest daughter graduated high school in 2003, 66% of high school graduates went to college. Harvard hadn't gotten much bigger in those intervening years. And I think that what you have to remember is that your parents love you deeply. And so they're afraid for you because the world is wicked, wicked hard. But also, it's a game. The first school district that has the courage to start publishing how many of their students actually graduate from college is the school district that will get my respect. The game that anybody cares about is getting you into college. Yeah. And frankly, if they haven't prepared you, you're not going to succeed. So true. So I've not answered your question. I apologize, because I have to. I guess that you're telling me I need to write that book that will give your mom and dad. Here's a good question. If you're feeling under a ton of pressure about this, ask your parents really gently, and ask the other adults that are important in your family's life what they majored in when they first got to college, and see how many of them actually have jobs that are connected with that major. Some people do, often teachers and people like engineers and stuff, but most of us kind of bumble around a lot. And to expect any human being at 18 to really know what they're going to do is a little unrealistic. So what I tell kids, here's my advice for life, right? Don't get high, don't drink, leave your pants on.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Oh, that was great.
You're so awesome.